J McDougall creates sensuous wall-mount sculptures and vessels from native hardwoods. Let's learn more about his art today as we visit his Fergus Falls studio.
There you have it. Nothing to that, huh?
Very cool. So, Jay, can you tell us a little bit about your background experience and how you ended up as an artist working in wood? I know you started out with a much more technical background.
My training and education was more in design and furniture design and building. And so an awful lot of that involved learning about the material wood technology, and which has been very helpful certainly in this body of work. So I opened my own studio in 1982, and you have to understand that I come from a long line of wood people. I'm the 6th generation in the state of Minnesota who's been working in the wood industry. And they weren't doing anything related to this. I mean, it was making windows and doors and selling lumber. And you'll see some of my older furniture pieces inside. I was really seeking to do the most with the least. I mean, really efficiency of line and form. And so this was really a natural progression to get a little more of an abstraction. I don't think that's unusual for anyone in a creative field, is they become more mature as a craftsman or an artist. It becomes a little more abstract. And the work I am doing now is taking wood certainly in a different direction.
So Jay, explain to us about the wood you use. It's not typically what we would think of as being a primo desirable wood to work with.
Which really works to my advantage, because when I am out looking and sourcing wood, which comes from within 20 miles of my studio right here in Fergus Falls, what I'm looking for is not what the lumber guys are out there looking for. They're looking for first and second select type, don't want knots, don't want what I consider as character, the inclusions. You know, they're not defects. You know, I'll find a knot or some nice crotch grain that has a crack in it. You'll see a piece inside later that has some inclusions. They're really enhancements. And so it's nice because I'm not in competition with people looking for furniture grade lumber. What I am looking for is wood with a lot of character. Predominantly, I limit it well exclusively to hardwoods, and I like the close-grained hardwoods. Oak, for instance, is considered an open-grained hardwood. It doesn't lend itself to the real fluid shapes that I'm after. So if I limit myself at all, it's close-grained Minnesota hardwoods. In this case, this is a box elder burl. Now I've soaked this and removed the bark so you can see what an actual burl looks like from the outside. From the inside, now this particular one, this will get cut away. But this had some real beetle activity going on. That's what all these borings are in it. Oftentimes what works best for me are the woods that have been dead or have been down for a little while. They still have to be wet and green so they're not cracked. But when things have died or begun to die, and there may be diseased areas or stressed areas, the early stages of decay, a lot of color and character comes into that material. It's very typical to have this red. You don't find that in a lot of woods. Actually, in the early stages of decay, you do. You get reds and greens and blacks. It's just the red in the box elder is from a different source.
fascinated by this piece. I just love the lines. This is a finished piece where you've, I assume this is waxed or varnished?
It's oil and wax because my forms are very organic forms, and so I really like to go with a very organic finish. Something that becomes part of the piece, isn't just a surface coating.
And I noticed that this has got some kind of a natural crack that was in the wood, and that you've kind of incorporated that in the design of the piece. Can you talk to us about that? I mean, some people look at cracks as being a negative thing, but it seems to me it's a very strong element of your design.
And this is what I refer to as an inclusion. I've included this character in the wood into the finished piece because it serves to really enhance the piece. So as you can see, part of this whole shape has been driven by this inclusion. And you can see the rays emanating from it. I mean, when you get it in the right light, these rays that looks like a cat's eye, and that's the term for it. It's chatoyance, which is a French term for cat's eye. Another thing you may find interesting, when I carve the vessels, I also carve a texture on the underside. I don't know how well the camera's going to show that, but I carve a texture and then I put a dye on it, an aniline dye, and then sand back through to bring some of the wood out. And so it almost has a rind or a bark-like look to it, but it really serves to reinforce the line on the edge. Nice contrast if it's being displayed on a wooden surface. You get nice separation between the materials. And the natural inclination is for people to think, well, this is the outside of the tree, the log, where in fact I carve from the bark down. This is the inside of the log. If I were to carve from the bark or basically scoop it out like people think of a canoe, a dugout canoe. If I were to scoop it out, technically I could be carving right along one single growth ring, and there would be total lack of grain and lack of character. It's also a stability issue. I end up with something that's a little more like quarter sawn lumber, a little more stable. And so it does several things, but it doesn't change the fact that the first inclination is of people is to look at it and think this is the bark, this is the outside.
In your demonstration, I think you were doing something kind of similar to this, whereas here you've got this smooth, scooped out shape.
And my wall pieces, there are two different feels to them. One is almost body-like musculature, very smooth, very flowing. And this is a little harder. On that style that's more flowing, more anatomically looking muscly, when I carve those pieces, I'm thinking of if the wood were a water-soluble material, how would water shape it? If water was flowing over it for eons and eons like rock, how would it be shaped? And that's the feel and the look I'm after in that one form of carving. The second form, where this really came to be, I just started doing this. I'm still doing both because I like both. But this came last winter when I was looking at the snowdrift at the side of the studio here, which was very sculpted with a very hard line. So these pieces are actually, I have to keep in mind what would wind do to the wood. So you end up with two different pieces, or two different effects. They're both very fluid, very flowing, but very different. When I carve my pieces, they're wet. I carve my work wet because it can't be cracked from drying. I put the wet piece in the kiln, so I can take a wet log and bring it down to dry, rough-shaped piece within 2 or 3 days. The idea being, as wood dries, it has a tendency to, well, it does, it shrinks. And there's the potential for cracking if it's not drying and shrinking uniformly, which is why I carve it first. Now at this stage I can take it out and I do all my finish shaping and sanding once it's dry. But up until now I've been working it in a very wet state. Alright, so for my smaller vessels, like I was showing you in the drying rack, this is a piece of willow, and this is where I start. I bring in the wet log. So on this log, this is typical of what I'm looking for in a log. It has the branches, the knots, the crotch. In areas like this, I'll get a nice flame grain with the chatoyance. I can even, when I look at it, I can look at this and see in this branch cuff underneath here, I can see that grain telegraphing through the wood, through the bark. It's almost like having x-ray vision. Most people don't look at it that way, but I look at it and think, ha ha ha, you know, there's really nice grain in there. So I will take this piece and cut it in half, and if things go well, I'll get 2 vessels out of this piece. You can also see in this we have some different woodpecker or beetle type activity in the bark. Again, things that most people as they walk by a down tree don't see. That's what I'm looking for. So this is one of my ideal pieces.
To learn more about Jay's art, visit our website at lakescountry.tv.